Now don't run.
Thank you.
Please, because you need to hear this.
Yes.
The man who was sitting in the car with me
Yes.
had heard most of what you said yesterday from me.
Oh, wow.
And I have been trying to reach him for a long time. Now, he thinks he's going to get to heaven because he's a nice guy. And he is a nice guy. He's a wonderful guy. I love him. But he doesn't know the Lord, and he totally rejects him. I've been reading this book, that book.
Whoa, okay.
Okay, and I'll explain this in detail later, and hopefully you can come next week.
Yes.
And because your church is closed. And you'll hear the end of this because I'm pretty sure I can't get through this today. But I was sitting there and you're telling me all this, and I'm thinking, you're speaking to the choir, you know. I believe everything that you said. I was just absolutely, and then I realized John was sitting there, and that wasn't for me.
Amen.
That was for John.
Praise God.
Yes.
And I was sitting there going, I know you. I recognize, but it was so out of context, it just did not go click. And now I remember. But anyway, God bless you and thank you. And I just really appreciate your love for the Lord.
Thank you.
Really nice meeting you.
Anyway, that was so fabulous. And it is such a confirmation for what God is doing. Anyway, Ernie and I are doing this, and we are going through Isaiah, and we have now reached chapter 11. But one of the things that I discovered is that unless you have some idea about prophecy, you'll have absolutely no idea what Isaiah is talking about. Because Isaiah was one of the most important prophets that have discussed. And through Isaiah, and especially in chapter 11, this book that I showed you here, that book right down there, the great big one, that thing folds out to about 20 feet. It's really, really hard to watch. But this is where Isaiah, right here, this is Isaiah. And this line right here is 700, right here is 700 BC, or 30,300 years after the formation of the earth. So, minus 700 years from Christ, and this line right over here is minus 100 years. Now, I want you to note, Isaiah ended his ministry at 698, I think it was. And the Israelites went into Babylon, into help me out. Captivity. Thank you, Don. I have to have my help here to keep me going. But anyway, here is Nebuchadnezzar. And until Nebuchadnezzar came along, this right here is Judah. This up here is Israel. And this is the time that Judah and Israel were separated. And they never came back together until now. In 1948, they came back together. But they stayed separated all those years. And Nebuchadnezzar took Judah here and took it into captivity and kept all the Jews there for 70 years. And Isaiah, through his talks about all this stuff that was going on right here, and he was talking about all the stuff that went on here. And he was talking about what's happening right now, today. And he was talking about, oh, this is fun. Janet's going to really chew me out. And it's your fault, Don. You gave this to me. So, anyway, the millennium is one of the major topics of Isaiah. And if you don't understand anything about any of those things as you go through Isaiah, Isaiah didn't understand it. They could not conceive of what was coming. But today I'm going to declare to you the millennium is right around the corner. Many of us here still might live long enough to see the return of Jesus Christ. And through this book that I've been reading, here, let's see, wait a minute. I need to sit down. The review. The coming judgments, and this is Isaiah, chapters 1 through 5. The call of Isaiah in chapter 6. Coming of child Emmanuel. You remember in 7, Isaiah predicted the birth of Christ. He would be called Emmanuel, and that happened 700 years later. Okay, and right now we're in chapter 11, and we've just done 10. So let's go to 10 for a quick review of what I did last week. Now, in Isaiah 10:24, and I have to find 10:24. This is the wrong one. No, this is the right one. I'm on the wrong page. Remember we talked about the king of Assyria and how he was an extremely proud and arrogant man? Well, God has said in verse 24 here and 26 that he's going to take care of that man. He's going to deal with him, and that's what happens almost immediately afterwards. In that day the Lord, and then in verse 27 he says, in that day, what day is that? Can anybody tell me?
The day that the Lord comes back.
Actually, no. Actually, we'll know here in a moment, because in verses 28 through 32, the Assyrian army is attacking Jerusalem. Now you remember that the cities that were listed, and all of them were falling. The first one was only 8 miles from Jerusalem, and then the last one was only 2 miles from Jerusalem. God was going to deal with them. Now, in verses 33 through 34, God uses another tree example. Now, we know that Isaiah loves to use tree examples because he talks about the Lord and his chain from, and let me go back to this, right here, here is Judah coming across here, and see these people along here? These are all the line that leads to Jesus' birth. Every one of these people was a great-grandparent of Jesus, all the way through. And they're all part of this. And God is trying to preserve this line. So, when they come up and they're ready to take Jerusalem and wipe them out, God steps in. And he cuts down that tree. And that tree never sprouts again. The Assyrians are have been done in their attack on Jerusalem for them. Okay, now we're going to talk about prophecy today. And I'm going to tell you about how I came to the Lord. Because I was working as a manufacturer's representative. One of my friends was the vice president of a crystal manufacturing company in Florida. Bill Shipley was like this man here, absolutely on fire for the Lord. And he was working on me. He'd have me read books and do everything else. And he'd call me up and we'd be talking on the phone, and pretty soon I'd go, Bill! Just like that. He said, okay, Joe, but I'm not going to give up on you, because I'd get disgusted with it. I was tired of listening to all this stuff, right? And so Bill would be quiet, but he'd come right back, and then, the next phone call, he'd bring up the subject and start talking to me. Well, he got through to me because I was studying prophecy, and everything I'm going to show you today, I learned back then. And at one point, I was going to Janet's church, and I realized everything in the Bible is true.
Amen.
And I am on the outside looking in. And if this stuff happens, I'm a goner. That was it, period. I was done for. And so it took me a little while, but I finally reached a point where I got down on my face and I said, God, show me the light. And that's how I came to the Lord. And that was January 9th, 1984. And boy, have I had a time then. But following that, the Lord, before long, said, I don't want you studying prophecy. I've got many other things for you to do. And as some of you know who know me, I've done a lot in the years to come, and I've made a lot of mistakes. Don't ask Janet, because she'll fill you in. But in teaching this, I knew that we needed to have a better understanding of prophecy, and I was still confused about a number of things. And so during this last week, I started out the week by searching for some material that would fill me in on what was happening with prophecy. And the Lord showed me this book, and I downloaded it off of Amazon, put it in here, and I started reading it. I could not stop reading it. I read it day and night for 2 days. And was it Friday? Yeah, it was Friday afternoon. I finally finished the book. Everything he said in there fit right in with what I had already learned. But he just put it in there. And I learned a few new things also. Okay, you can get that. If you've got a Kindle, you can get it for $3.99. You can figure out different ways to do it. I would recommend that you get this book and read it, because what I'm going to tell you, I just barely touch on all the stuff that this man talks about. It's well written, it's in simple language, it is straight, and it comes right to the point. And I finally started laughing because he's just got this writing style that is great. But it just led me on and on and on and on through. Now, the rapture. The rapture, 1 Thessalonians 4. Now, what I did is I took notes out of that book and I put them into this document right here. And if you have a Kindle, which are free to download, by the way, if you've got a computer, you can get this. And I wrote down the pages and stuff, if you want a copy of this, I will just copy it for you and bring it to you next week. But one of the key verses, and by the way, in my reading here, somewhere somebody said 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. 1/3 of what God has presented to you is prophecy. Now, do you think prophecy is important to him? It's how he proved to me that he was real. And I accepted it. And boy, am I seeing what's happening come true. But in First Thessalonians, which is one of the major passages, it says, "We tell you this directly from the Lord. We who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet him ahead of those who have died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the believers who have died will rise from their graves. Then together with them, we who still are alive and remain on the earth will be caught up into the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever." So encourage each other with those words. What is one of the things, and I don't expect the rhetorical questions, that I've been trying to teach? That we can trust God to take care of us. Now, Jesus, Mark 13:22. Oh, here it is. Okay, I got it. Mark 13:32. Excuse me. Oh, it's 32.
It's 32?
I don't know, it's one or the other. You'll hear it. I've got 32 written down here and 22 up there. Might have been a typo, but anyway, Jesus himself said, "No man knows the day or the hour of my return, not even myself. Only my Father in heaven knows." So, one of these days, we're going to be walking down the street or sitting watching TV, and boom, we're going to be gone. And that's called the rapture. We will have no clue. Just like in the day when Noah was getting ready to go. Boom, all of a sudden, the rains came and everybody was marrying and having their parties and doing everything just like it always was. And then it was over with. And he had been telling them for 100 years this was going to happen, but they ignored him. Now God is telling us what's coming up. And we should be ready. If nothing else, we should not worry about all this stuff that's happening because God is in control.
They'll get your blood boiling though, don't they?
Oh, yes. The fact that Chuck Noah is not here today just absolutely outrages me.
Yeah.
Because where he lived, they've locked him down. He's in jail. He's in the equivalent of being in jail. He cannot leave his room. He's living in some assisted living place, and they've decided nobody can get together with each other, and they will take a few of them out at a time and feed them and keep them apart and send them back. He can't come here. I'm outraged by that.
We should pray. That's why we should pray. I think we need to be concerned with what's going on. We don't have to be feared. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm not afraid. I mean, they come and lock me up. Praise the Lord.
But I think we need
They'll
to pray.
try to shut me up at some point. But in The next thing I got on my list here is the second coming of Christ. When the second coming takes place, Jesus will return to earth as the leader of heaven's armies. Now, this is right out of the book. He will come on the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. Matthew 24:30. His coming will be seen by the whole world. How many of you watch worldwide news? Events that happen, football games, and I don't mean football like we play football.
Soccer
I mean,
games.
at any moment we can watch anything that happens in the world, and everybody can watch. And there will be deep mourning among the people of the world, not joy. Matthew 24:30. He will physically set foot on the earth. In fact, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, and it will split in two. That is the Mount of Olives. That's Zechariah 14:4. Instead of coming for his holy people, he will come with them. Keep that in mind. For almost, in fact, right up until this week, I had it envisioned that we would get caught up and then turn around and come back with Christ and destroy the enemies of God. That's how I had it figured in my head, but it did not fit, and it did not make sense. And I did not understand it, but I was, okay, well, Lord, you know what's going on, you know what's happening. And I hope maybe you understand this, because I'll tell you here in a moment.
Praise God.
And he will execute judgment on the world. Jude 1:14 through 15. He will fight against the Antichrist, the king of the world, and their armies, and he will destroy the Antichrist with the breath of his mouth and the glory of his coming. 2 Thessalonians 2:8. In doing so, he will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed.
Amen.
And he will be given authority over all the nations of the world. Now, oh shoot, I can't think of this author's name right now. I've got it in here somewhere. This I learned. Jesus is coming back twice. He's returning one more time. There's the rapture, and then there's the second coming. They're two separate events. Can you understand why so many people get confused? I was definitely confused. I don't know if you knew prophecy of any extent at all, but it left me confused. Because, and it says here, if you think both these events are the one and the same, it's understandable. You'll find it hard to reconcile the two accounts. But when Christ comes, he will come in the air, and we will be caught up to him. He won't even step on the earth. And then we will go to probably New Jerusalem and be with him. And then at some time, and I think very shortly afterwards, he will return, because the people who see these events occur will not die before the completion of the rapture and the Great Tribulation. And I'm already out of time. And I hope Ernie will let me continue with this next week, even though Ernie's going to be back. And so I'll be giving him a call today, and I hope my phone's recording here so I can send him this so he can get an idea of what's going on. But just so that you know, and this I'll make this my last point. There is no tribulation for Christians, Revelations 3:10, because you have obeyed my command to persevere, I will protect you from the great time of testing that will come upon the whole world to test those who belong to this world. I will start here. I'll do some review, and this is where I will get started next time. But we'll talk about Daniel, and we're going to talk about exponential growth and how that ties in. There's wars and rumors of wars, famines, plagues, earthquakes, false messiahs, travel and knowledge. Daniel could not explain what he saw. Can you imagine somebody from 2,700 years ago landing here now, seeing huge cities, airplanes flying? I know if I went through that transition, I wouldn't be able to have any comprehension of what's going on.
I think he'd be awestruck.
Yes.
In the 90s, we had a guy that got released from prison that had been in prison for 23 years, and he couldn't believe the world's changed then. What a big change it was. He didn't even know about microwave ovens and stuff at that point, you know.
Yeah.
So so it isn't hard at all for me to believe what, you know, that Daniel would have a very hard time, or John relaying what they seen, you know.
Yeah. Well, the prophecies talk about all these kingdoms here and how they're going to be dealt with.
Yep.
What's going to happen in that area, the Red Sea and there's a river over here. It goes right through here. The Euphrates River. So, anyway, next week, Don, if you would, please